The decisions we make will affect every single person in this country. And the effects of those decisions will stay with us for years. Because the legacy we've been left is so bad, the measures that we need to deal with it will be unavoidably tough.
Britain's national parks are under threat. After Westminster unveiled some of the biggest spending cuts in decades, the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, who control national park funding, face the full force of the unforgiving budget.
I don't think anyone expected it to be that bad. I think that people knew that when the Conservatives came in and formed the coalition government and made the economic recovery their top priority, it was going to be difficult.
We live in an increasingly urbanised, populated and busy society. I want to find out the outcome that decisions made under bright lights, within concrete streets and behind closed doors from the self-proclaimed greenest government ever will have on our countryside. Park authorities now face much reduced budgets of up to 30%. I want to explore what role these wild spaces have within our modern world, how they are valued compared with the need for the country to make much needed savings, and most importantly, what sort of future do these unique environments hold? Covering over 14,000 square miles, Britain's 15 national parks are areas of outstanding natural beauty. Covering ancient woodland, rolling hills, sandy beaches and mountain ranges, the parks look to protect their best interests, be it the vast array of wildlife or long-standing cultural heritage. Each park is run by an authority who works alongside other organisations such as the National and Woodland Trusts to help preserve their individual interests. Charities such as the Campaign for National Parks now say that these interests are threatened.
28.5% plus another 5% that the parks have already had this year. That's a third of their budgets going, and these are small authorities at the end of the day. Most of them don't have budgets larger than your average comprehensive school, and yet they've been entrusted to look after these special places on behalf of the nation. So I think we must ask, is this conservation on the cheap?
Stretched across 5 English counties, the Peak District is a rugged landscape of hills and valleys. With 28.5% cuts, the park will see its budget decrease from £8.2 million for 2010-11 to £6.5 million by 2014. This year alone they must save £500,000. Jobs are being lost, many of which are held by people in local communities.
Well, clearly it was very disappointing. I mean, these are very large cuts by any measure, 28.5% in real terms. That's £2 million off our budgets over the coming year. But we've got a very good plan in place. We'll be doing some things differently. We'll be transferring some of the land and properties that we've previously owned, places like the Eastern Moors, which we'll be transferring to the National Trust and the RSPB, and a similar process will transfer the Roaches estate in Staffordshire and the North Lees estate, the famous Stanage Edge. And I'm very confident that that's one of the ways in which we'll reduce our costs. But these are big cuts, and that will mean changes in the way we do things and cuts in some of the services that we offer to the public.
The Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, or DEFRA, says that they will have to reprioritise their spending, focus taxpayers' money on British farming and food production while enhancing the environment and biodiversity, as well as supporting a green economy resilient to climate change. They have said that no park will lose its protected status as a result of the budget cuts. Charities, however, say that the cuts will, for the national parks at least, make the park authorities have to make decisions that will severely affect the sustainability, education, public awareness and conservation of the parks and for the people who live, work and visit them, and will ultimately be extremely detrimental to their well-being. Over 60 million people visit the parks each year, as well as the estimated 450,000 strong population who live within their boundaries, often providing the necessary jobs and services required to manage such a massive influx of people. The The balance between humans and the habitat that they occupy is fine, nowhere more so than in the New Forest with its 6,000 strong herd of free roaming horses. In Northumberland, Peak District and other parks, jobs such as the ranger role are being cut.
What we have done so far is where there have been cutbacks in some departments, we're able to help. We get out on the ground and speak to people. For instance, the village green that's being set up, we've been able to go out and speak to people and then come back to the office and say this is what they want to do. And the officers who are responsible for things like the landscape, the trees, the ecologist, the land advice service, they can all say, well, they can all give advice, which we then feed back to the applicants. And that helps the process, it speeds it up, and it must save money because it saves the officers time.
Within the national parks there are many interests at stake. Communities are worried that local jobs will go, services to repair environmental damage may be reduced, education will suffer and wildlife protection could see cutbacks. Earlier this year, DEFRA announced plans to sell off large areas of British woodland, much of which sits within park boundaries. A public outcry followed, leading to DEFRA admitting they had got this one wrong. Independent bodies such as the Woodland Trust, who do not rely as heavily on governmental grants, were instrumental in helping this turnaround.
If the DEFRA cuts do continue as they've been mooted, then potentially there could be a loss to funding for woodland creation and tree planting. The good thing is that the Woodland Trust itself, the majority of our income actually comes from our own sources. So around 4/5 of our income comes from sources that aren't state funded. So in terms of the Woodland Trust's plans to double native woodland cover, they shouldn't be greatly affected by the DEFRA cuts. But obviously we want this to become a wider project, not just for the Woodland Trust, but for all conservation bodies and for the state and DEFRA to really support us and get behind tree planting.
The response from the general public that helped the Woodland Trust was clearly not expected. For the millions of people who walk and visit these areas, they leave a lasting impression. As it was explained, it can often be the smaller things for many people that make the big difference.
I'm frankly quite shocked that a government that claims to be the greenest government ever is imposing cuts on the national parks. That is not exactly a huge amount of money that goes into them anyway, and to impose cuts on that anyway is frankly quite shocking. Well, I often use information points, car parks, roads, everything like that, really, that enables me to have information of the area and to freely travel around the area. And if you impose cuts on these things, then really what I do could struggle. It's as simple as that.
Well, I love the opportunity to walk all day and just being a completely natural environment, whether that's the heaths and woodlands and bogs of the New Forest or the top of a plateau in the Cairngorm.
Well, it's really the only place in the country where you can really wander and explore in the sort of vastness of these open spaces.
It just has to be the freedom to go anywhere.
As London continues to help find ways to pull the UK out of staggering debt, the park's futures may seem uncertain.
They're definitely threatened in the short term, but they are resilient organisations, and I think their approach to addressing these cuts is to really meet them head on, to make the cuts as quickly and as effectively as they can.
But we are having to make savings in our property management, in our visitor services. That has sadly meant losing jobs. But that's something we've had to do. But the important thing is that we're protecting the really important roles that only a National Park Authority can do.
As our lives become busier, the need for our national parks has never been greater. Government cuts have hit the parks hard and they will suffer the consequences. However, with the level of pride and respect that I've seen given to these breathtaking places, I can't help but feel many generations to come will come to appreciate Britain's magnificent national parks.